Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Word for Word reading series event featuring the winners of the 10th annual Penmen Review Fall Fiction Contest. This year's contest had more than 750 submissions, from which our 5 winners were selected. They are: first place, Train a Comin' by N. Ryan Tucker. In second place, Waiting for the Sun to Go Down by Jesse Teller. Third place, C by Amy Midgett. Fourth place, The Roller Coaster at the End of the World by Jenel Alan. And fifth place, The 5 Stages of Grieving My Attention Span by Megan Okonsky. We're excited to have the authors of these wonderful stories here tonight to read their stories and celebrate SNHU's online literary magazine, the Penmen Review. My name is Paul Whitcover. I'm the Associate Dean of the Online MFA, and I'm here with Jacob Powers, who's the Associate Dean of the BA and MA Creative Writing Programs. I'm going to turn it over, in fact, to Jacob now to introduce our first reader of the night. We'll be going in reverse order from the 5th place winner up to the 1st place winner.
Thank you for that, Paul. Again, welcome everyone. It's always great to celebrate the Penmen Review Fall Fiction Contest winners. And I'd like to introduce our first reader for the night, Megan Okonsky. Megan found her devotion to writing while backpacking through the world in her 20s. She had a travel blog for a few years, then pivoted to copywriting and ghostwriting. She hopes to continue writing fiction that readers can connect to emotionally, and her debut novel, The Barefoot Followers of Sweet Potato Grace, is set to be released in August 2025. Welcome, Megan, and looking forward to hearing this.
Hi, thank you for having me. All right. So my piece is called The 5 Stages of Grieving My Attention Span. And here we go. Denial. I blinked at the first bloop. Then I went back to my book. I scheduled 1 hour of peace at the coffee shop before going back to the office. 1 hour away from emails and texts. 1 hour focusing on a world-famous story printed up with ink on physical pages. I could focus. This was probably my fault. I chastised myself for forgetting to silence my cell phones before leaving work. 40 other things were on my mind on the 2-block walk to the Big Bean, but that was no excuse. No new messages, no new likes. Not phone number 1, not phone number 2. Both silenced. I chastised myself for forgetting that I had silenced my cell phones. I stared at the blank, smooth side of the booth across from me, breathing slowly to regain my focus. The Great Gatsby is one of the greatest novels ever written, and it demanded my attention. I reminded myself bloops happen everywhere, on the bus, on the sidewalk, in the Taco Bell. Bloops against the current, borne back ceaselessly. The third bloop, not my bloop. I closed my book and let out a loud sigh. Anger. My brain has melted into mush, but it's not my fault. Did I ask to be subjected to bloops and dings all day long? No, they did this. Bloops were built to release serotonin. Dings were built to be addictive. They know that. They want me distracted. They are ruining humankind. I hate them. I pictured myself scratching my arms in an empty room, pining for red notifications and the chime of a text. I pictured myself with sunken eyes and chattering teeth, fiending for an online purchase. I hated the digital world I was living in. The fourth bloop wasn't a bloop. It was a ding. Then quickly after, someone was playing a game on their phone at full volume in public. What an idiot. How could they do this in the Big Bean? How could they do this when people were around? Who was it? I furiously scanned the room. Only one other person was waiting for their order. A gaunt man, hunched over his phone, playing a game of bright blues and yellows. He was 3 booths in front of me, far enough away that I couldn't identify his game. It was probably a stupid game. He was probably a stupid person. His head remained steady, his eyes focused in one place, sucked into his game like a drooling animal. Lucky little asshole. He still had enough focus to match the candies, mow the crops, or win the coins. I couldn't get through 2 sentences in The Great Gatsby without rubbing the scar in my ear or squeezing my shoulders down my back. But this man stayed perfectly still, only moving his finger across the screen for some unknown purpose. What a dick. If he kept playing the game at full volume, I would burn the big bean to the ground. Bargaining. I wanted to confront him, but I delayed the conversation. Who am I to cause a scene in the big bean? Plus, I wasn't entirely sure if he deserved my rage for playing a little game on his phone. Maybe the man was deaf. Austin, where I live, has a large deaf population. If he was deaf, he couldn't hear how distracting his phone was to me. Maybe the man had a different form of attention disorder, one that prevents people from hearing other people, the one that my neighbor Sherry has. Sherry talks over me to complain about her ex-husband leaving, and if I didn't already know that his gambling problem became more important to him than their marriage. Maybe the man wasn't playing a game, but gambling. Maybe he was an addict, a misunderstood addict who needs grace in these trying times. Maybe the man wasn't raised right. I imagined a childish version of him with a younger face, neglected in his family home. All he ever had were video games. Video games raised him. They comforted him. They gave him a source of happiness that his down-and-out mother and philandering father could never provide. The gaunt man was so skinny because he was always malnourished. Oh, the humanity. The man looked up at me and saw me staring at him. I looked away. Depression. The man on his phone is just like me, addicted to our phones. Our brains are melted. I had a perfectly functioning brain when I was a kid. Then I took a job managing 15 lawyers' schedules. 4 months in, I started feeling the warmth of my brain sliding around my head like cheese, gracing a side of nachos. I still showed up to work. I took the money. I didn't meditate as often as I should. I was the problem, not him. I chose to melt my brain in exchange for $50,000 a year with laughable benefits. I'm stupid and worthless. Even if I were to quit, I would still be doomed. Aren't we all? Dating apps, mobile games, and apps for buying groceries are designed to squirt serotonin into our bloodstream to keep us coming back. Candy Crush, Snake, Pac-Man. Even before I took my job, I took a plane somewhere. In my bag was a Kindle with the greatest American novels ready for consumption. And throughout the flight, I kept returning to a simple game called Ball Defender, like an addict scampering around an alley of broken promises. Fitzgerald could satisfy the mind, but not as quickly as seeing those balls hit those blocks. Would I ever regain the ability to consume art properly? Could I watch a sunset without scratching my arms to check Instagram? I wondered if life was worth living. Acceptance. Vanilla latte for Caitlin. I took a deep breath, stood up, and grabbed the latte off the table. Next to the straws and lids was a box advertising donations to charity. I took out my phone, scanned the QR code, then donated. Walking back to my seat, I allowed myself to check Instagram before I went back to my book. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading that, Megan. Really appreciated the sound effects, as did a lot of folks in the chat. Really made it feel realistic, to say the least. I really also appreciated how the story was framed using the 5 stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is well known for: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think that really fits the theme quite well here. So well done. We'll stick around. We'll have you at the end of the event answer a couple of questions and stuff with your fellow winners. But thank you again. I'm going to pass this on to Paul now, and he's going to introduce our next reader.
Thanks, Jacob. So the next reader, let me make sure I unmuted myself. Yep. Our next reader will be Dr. Jenel Alan. Will be reading her 4th place story, The Roller Coaster at the End of the World. Jenel not only has a passion for writing, but a passion for history as well. She holds a PhD in history and works as a history professor. Currently, she is pursuing an MFA in creative writing at SNHU. Yay! Prior to the fall fiction contest, Jenel published Rel, a young adult fantasy novel. Her short stories and poems have been published online and in various anthologies. Welcome, Jenel.
Thank you. So my story is, the roller coaster at the end of the world. I have PhDs in 3 fields, including biochemistry, so I know the correct dosage to put in his apple juice. To get him away from his parents, I'd promised him a trip to Starland, the lunar colony's premier amusement park. That at least was true. And I knew it would work, because Starland's Astro Coaster was the biggest poster in his room. The blue and silver track would sometimes gleam in the flicker of his nightlight. He fits in the large rolling suitcase, just barely. At the spaceport, I engaged the device I invented to make him look like books and scientific equipment to the scanners. They don't search my bags. This is my 6th trip to the government's secret doomsday bunker. Also, I am a pudgy middle-aged woman with graying hair. I look like a grandmother, not a traitor. Besides, the Secret Service probably figures that if I was going to scream that the sky was falling, I'd have done it already. They're right. For 7 months and 3 days since my telescope first predicted the trajectory of 8 kilometers of space rock, I have kept my mouth shut. Just as the shuttle takes off, before it kicks through the atmosphere, I look down and see a white farmhouse with smoke coming out of the chimney. It is surrounded by a big red barn and trees on fire with fall. It is breathtaking in its fragility. I keep my hand on the large bag every minute of our trip, even as the Earth becomes a blue and white ball and the buildings of the U.S. lunar colony rise and enclose the shuttle. The spaceport is as busy as I've ever seen it. Things were suggested, covertly. Starland is offering a once-in-a-decade sale on entrance tickets. A few conventions were suddenly offered attractive incentives to relocate to the moon. The AMA convention had been a particular coup. And hey, doctors, we'll lower our hotel prices so you can bring the family. But my daughter, my brilliant workaholic daughter who walked in my footsteps, she couldn't be persuaded to leave her work, even when I offered to buy the Starland tickets myself. I wipe tears from my face as we land. No one comments. Those of us on these special flights have all had our moments, tears, shouting, even one heart attack. The astrophysicist of the apocalypse is allowed hers. As I leave the shuttle, I assure the agents that I'll be at the bunker in time. I just want a few minutes to myself first. I roll my bags out of their view and to a waiting van. I've paid this driver 1/3 of my life savings to look the other way as an adult child emerges from a suitcase into the back seat. My grandson's mind is foggy, but I give him some water, his favorite chocolate bar, and a small fanny pack with as much money as would fit. A spark of genuine life comes into his eyes when I tell him we're almost at Starland. I take his hand as we leave the van. He's awake enough to stare wide-eyed at everything as we wait in line. He points through the glass dome above our heads. Look at the ships, Grandma. I do my best to smile and try to smooth his sweet brown hair that's been matted from his time in the suitcase. I paid for the VIP tickets, so we're through the gates in minutes, despite the crush. In so little time, we round the corner and the Astro Coaster towers over us, near to scraping the dome of the colony. I wince as a set of cars comes rattling by, metal on metal with Doppler effect screams. He's already tugging my hand. Wait, Jamie, I say, pulling him up short. Can I have a hug? He sighs, but complies as I crouch down. His cheek is slightly sticky against mine. I love you, I whisper. My voice is trembling, but drowned out by another deafening screech of roller coaster wheels on tracks and howling teens. I hold tight long enough for him to say, Grandma. Sorry, sweetheart. I let go, stand quickly, step back. The park is so crowded that 2 different people jostle me, and I have to grit my teeth to keep from snapping at them. I tilt my head toward the shorter, though still sizable VIP line for the Astro Coaster. Off you go then. You're not coming? He frowns for the first time since we entered the park. Don't you want a picture of you on the coaster for your wall? I pray that this will work. He's tall for his age. They will let him ride unaccompanied. I checked and rechecked. His grin returns. Oh, yeah. Without another word, he races toward the line. I lose my breath at the suddenness of it, struggle to regain myself. I watch as he enters the line. Several times he looks back and waves, his small hand almost lost in the sea of people. As he disappears into the complicated machinery of the amusement park ride, I am grateful once again for his name, James Smith. There are thousands of them. Another 1/3 of my life savings paid a hacker to wipe his fingerprints, dental records, and identity from every system they could find. The colony authorities may eventually figure out his identity, but it will take time. As I stumble back to the van, my skin feels puffy and numb. I return to the spaceport, use my own faked ID to board a commercial shuttle. Once seated, I look at the countdown on my phone, 9 hours, 37 minutes. We'll be on the ground by the time I brush the countdown away and replace it with a picture of Jamie, awkwardly smiling as he stands by his first real bike. The bike is the same blue as the Astro coaster. We were told it was treason, the death penalty, if we tried to save anyone through extraordinary measures. I am carrying out my own sentence. The flight is delayed, and the shuttle is circling the spaceport as the clock winds down. On one pass, I see the farmhouse again. There's no smoke now, but I can see tiny dots of laundry flapping on a clothesline. White sheets, maybe? Emergency warnings start to go off on phones. Some new scientist who has realized the truth and gotten through to the media? Or did someone else give in? There is a sudden crush of loud sound, a metallic roar screams. I have just enough time to smile as I realize the end of the world sounds a lot like. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Jenel. What a powerful story. It's the combination of the relationship between the grandmother and her son and the science fiction setting. I know want to talk about that more a little later, but I just thought that was an inspired way to tell this story. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Our next story is from our third place winner, who is Amy Midgett. Amy's unable to be with us tonight. She asked me to read her story for her, which I am honored to do. But I can tell you a little bit about Amy before I do so. Or Jacob, why don't you do that?
Sure. So Amy was a journalist in the U.S. Coast Guard for 22 years. Now she enjoys writing fiction and horror. She is currently pursuing a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at SNU, and she aims to work with an agent and have her stories traditionally published. So, Paul, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
All right, without further ado, C by Amy Midgett. The 757 bucked and shuddered beneath their feet. Hank gripped Elizabeth's hand as she buried her face in the crook of his neck and shoulder. With his free hand, he cupped the back of her neck. He felt each vertebrae beneath her paper-thin skin. In the aisle, flight attendants called for everyone to fasten their seatbelts. Passengers peppered them with questions, but the cabin crew just reassured them the captain had everything under control. Hank, Elizabeth whispered into his ear, "What if we miss the sunset?" "Shh," he said. "It'll be all right. We'll be there soon enough." He met Elizabeth in 1973 while she was waiting tables at Paulie's Diner in Boston. He'd recently started driving for a food delivery service, and Paulie's was on his route. Hank had noticed Elizabeth before, and he began taking extra care with his hair and uniform on days when he might see her. One afternoon, he'd finished unloading and gone up front to get a signature. Elizabeth was alone, other than the cook, and she was harried with demands from the patrons. "You'll have to wait a minute," she called to Hank over her shoulder. He watched, captivated by the pixie-like girl with dark hair carrying the tray laden with plates of food. She couldn't be more than 5'2" and 100 pounds, maybe 19 years old. Customers ribbed her good-naturedly. "Hey, Lizzie," a guy in janitor's greens hollered. "There's a fly in my suit." His two buddies guffawed. "Keep flapping your jaws, Billy, and it'll have somewhere else to land," Elizabeth shot back. After several months of deliveries, Hank worked up the courage to ask her out. Over dinner, she talked about her father and a trip to the Grand Canyon he'd taken before he'd met her mother. "Dad said it was the most spiritual place he'd ever been," Elizabeth said. One day when she was 6 years old, her father brought her a Navajo dream catcher and hung it above her bed. Every night when he tucked her into bed, he promised Elizabeth if she dreamed only happy dreams, he would take her to the Grand Canyon someday. Then he got sick, and the cancer put an end to their plans. But I'll see it someday, Elizabeth said. Only a few minutes had passed. To Hank, it felt like hours, since the flight captain had announced the discrepancy with the plane's airspeed indicators. They were making an emergency landing in Dallas. After an initial bout of agitated conversation, the passengers were mostly quiet. Hank heard a woman crying softly, and several people around them tried to make cell phone calls. The plane surged again, and Elizabeth leaned further into Hank. The purple headscarf she wore to cover her bare scalp slipped sideways, and she absently tugged it back into place. I can't see it, she said. The bleakness in her voice broke his heart. Hank cupped her face between his palms. Close your eyes, love. She did. See the sky? Purple, orange, red, Hank said. See the red rocks and the pink blossoms on the prickly pear and cholla cactus? And down at the bottom, the blue of the Colorado, like a ribbon. Hank kissed her left temple, and she relaxed a little. We're dancing on the observation deck, he said, closing his eyes and letting the image take over. We don't need music. 10 months after they met, they stood before a justice of the peace, saying vows. Their stainless steel rings and Elizabeth's simple white dress had been bought in an East Boston secondhand store the day before. The honeymoon was a promise. You'll see the Grand Canyon someday, Elizabeth, he said to her on their wedding night, moments before they slipped into bed together for the first time. I swear to you. I believe you, she said, and kissed his bare shoulder. You're my dream catcher. The ink had barely dried on their marriage license when Hank came home from work to find Elizabeth sitting at the table in their tiny apartment. She held up a plastic strip showing a thin blue line on it. Guess the Grand Canyon will have to wait, she said, smiling. He lifted her off her feet and swung her in a circle. The plane rolled sharply to the right, and overhead compartments burst open, sending leather cases and hard plastic roller bags reeling through the cabin. Oxygen masks dropped in front of them. Elizabeth moaned, and her eyes flew open. Stay with me in the canyon, Elizabeth, Hank said. Smell the desert air after the rain. Blue agave, sage, orange blossoms. His lips brushed her ears so she could hear him over the noise of the struggling airplane. She closed her eyes again. Hank and Elizabeth clasped hands in the lobby of the hospital's oncology department, waiting for the results of what would become the first in a string of biopsies over the next 20 years. What if they have to grow up without a mother, Elizabeth said through choked tears. Who else knows that Jake likes ham, not turkey, or that Lucy only likes the blue M&Ms? Hush, Hank said. His own fear for her threatened to bubble over, but he tamped it down with tremendous effort. It'll be benign. Besides, I still have to take you to the Grand Canyon. And the biopsies were benign for many years, until one wasn't. Hank slid the envelope with Grand Canyon Adventures printed on it across the table. Inside were plane tickets, hotel reservations, and a brochure for a sunset helicopter tour. Elizabeth inhaled, her breath still raspy from the last round of chemo. Her wide brown eyes implored him from bruised and hollowed sockets. Next week? But Jake's graduating law school, and Lucy, if not now, when, Hank said, more harshly than he intended. We're going. The kids insisted. She was quiet for a moment, watching him closely. Finally, she placed her hand on his, and he winced at how cold and dry it was. You're always keeping my bad dreams away. But who keeps away yours, she said, a melancholy smile touching her pale lips. Okay, let's go. Hank felt the 757's airspeed drop, and the aircraft began a sickening spin. Under the din of vibrating metal, passengers sobbed and prayed. The flight attendants were strapped in their jump seats, holding hands. He pulled his wife closer, their heads pressed together. The window behind Elizabeth showed nothing but confusion, and Hank shut his eyes to it. Elizabeth, we're here, he said, his own tears mixing with hers. We're flying above the canyon. Oh, look at the sunset, the colors. I see it, Elizabeth whispered. I love you, my dream catch. And that's how it ends.
Thank you for reading that, Paul. I think we had mentioned how there's a lot of, it's always interesting to see how the stories year over year in Penman have this consistent theme and overlap. And this one, especially with Janelle's previous one, there's a lot clearly happening with this, like, flying to doom, basically. And love these. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's like these two stories could have come out of a single anthology. Just really amazing and serendipitous parallels. Both incredibly strong stories. They stand on their own, but like you said, Jacob, it's interesting the kind of coincidental threads that link so many of the stories together.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you for reading that. And Amy, we're thinking of you and we hope you are well. And we are going to move on now to our next reader of the night, Jesse Teller. And I think, Paul, would you like to introduce him?
Sure.
Okay.
Our fourth reader, Jesse Teller, will be reading his second place winning story, Waiting for the Sun to Go Down. Jesse discovered his love of writing after receiving a creative writing assignment from his fifth grade teacher, Mr. Olson. Olson allowed him to stay in his room during recess and encouraged him to continue writing. We all need a Mr. Olson in our lives. Teller's love of writing was nurtured further in high school when his English teacher discovered he was a writer. This is Jesse's first year at SNHU, where he is pursuing his bachelor's in creative writing and literary theory. Jesse, welcome and take it away.
Okay. First, a little disclaimer: I'm dyslexic, so this could be a bumpy ride, but I've practiced it and I know this story, so we'll see what happens. Waiting for the sun to go down. There's a low hum, a bit of a hiss, like that first few minutes on vinyl before the song starts. You can hear this churning out low and slow. You're in the dark now, lying on your floor with those huge headphones on. Around you, the world is still going. You have someone in the kitchen cooking a thankless meal. You have a sour man with sore feet drinking a beer who just wants to be left alone in a rundown chair, threadbare and lumpy. You can still hear the world. The trucks are blazing by your house right close to the highway, and you can hear them now because the music is creeping. The notes so muted you can barely hear them. But they're there. They have a whispered promise because your friends told you this was a good record. You spent the last year Christmas money on it. You're broke again, but the kids keep talking about how this is the album. So here you are, breathless on the floor of your bedroom, waiting for magic. The first hard notes that come to are bass. The songwriter's just laying this out, getting that first coat down, like that model you made with your father before he started to hate you. When he wasted all that time applying a primer. The bass hits harder. You feel that chord in your chest, like the strained beat of a heart attack you'll have when you're 40. Too young to die, not too young to try. Now the bass seems angry, and you can feel it boxing you in. It's trapping you. Drums come out like a wildfire you once saw when a bolt of lightning hit a field outside of town. The drums blister the inside of your head like the fire blistered the paint on the road sign. You're leaving small town, come back and see us. But these drums don't belong here. Not in this tiny burg. Not in your sample of a room. You're realizing now that you're in the dark. You only light the soft glow of the stereo volume button. You stare at it like a pistol in a game of roulette. You stare at it intensely because you're starting to sweat now. You're scared. The music has taken over the room. The music has a hold of you. You can feel its humid grip wrapped tight around your body. It's locking up your limbs. It's bringing you the trembling. With hate of all things mediocre, you grab the knob and hit the volume as hard as you can. You roll the tumbler. You pull the trigger. And when the first yowl of the singer hits your ears, you realize you made a mistake. You're in too deep now. It's too loud. It's too much. It's never going to be better than this. The next time you're here, you'll have heard the album. You'll be prepared for it. But the warnings your friends gave when they were in the car after school bitching about how good music doesn't make it on the air were too flat. Those warnings you did not take seriously. Now you're here. Now you're riding the edge of the razor of heavy metal, and you're never going to be the same. You thank God your parents gave you your own room when they kicked your sister out. No bratty younger brother is going to come in here and snap on the light. At that moment, you know you're a bad person because Even though you will not see your sister until you're 30 and she's pregnant with a sty in her eye bitching about Reagan, you're glad she's gone. Would have kicked her out yourself if you had known this moment would hit you. If you had known this moment, this music would take you. The first song fades, and with the loss of the music, you are panting and breathless, anticipation for the next song. Screaming from the start, this song has claws, and it grips you tight, painful in the shoulders, bloody, and it has wings, and it flies away with you. It has you in the air and terrified. It has you staring down at your life in disappointment, because here, when you're looking down at it all, you know she was not alone when she called you tonight. You heard that voice in the background, and you recognized it. You can't compare with that guy. And tomorrow at lunch, she will break the rest of your heart in half. She'd been taking a dull cleaver to it for years. Tomorrow, the final blow. The song carries you all over all that. She's a deep pain you'll carry with you for most of college. More songs, more crippling realizations. This album has a diabolical heart. It's a sergeant screaming that first day that you're useless after they shaved your head and called you a pansy. It's the dark heart of your teacher who really thought he'd make it in the pros but was cut. He's bitter and trying to fail you, looking for reasons to fail you. This dark-hearted album is a cruel kid with a BB gun. You're a bird with a broken wing. You're flapping in horror. The next song breaks upon you like a thief in your house at night. More and more it comes to you. It washes over you as you listen, one tragic horror, one mundane nightmare after the next. When the song drops like a bomb over innocence, you jump to your knees, you frantically crawl to your stereo, with hurried, traumatized hands, you flip the album, almost dropping it. The needle falls instead of gently resting, and you hear the record wail out one heart-wrenching beat before the song is on you. No soft hum or gentle hiss this time. The song is full, deep darkness now, and though you wish you could start it over and catch it from the beginning, you know there's no starting it over. The song has you now. You're in its grasp. Tony was a bully you faced in second grade. He never hit this hard. You never felt this helpless when he stared down at you, laughing while you cried. This song is the most hateful thing you've ever experienced, and you're not ready. You're not made of the strong stuff it takes to weather this song. The record keeps dropping on you harder and more devastating than you ever thought possible. And helpless, you can only grip tight to the spiral cord of the headphones and pray for the power to hear the next song. The song stops like the car your drunk buddy will be driving when it slams into a wall. Your neck will never be the same. And when that car makes that horrid sudden stop, you will think back to this moment as they load you into the ambulance. This is the song that will be stuck in your head. The next song fades like a road flare sputtering after lighting the area. By the time the end of the album comes, the record is pulled back to look at you, the music gloating over the ride it just gave you. No roller coaster your father forced you to ride was ever this satisfied after bringing you to tears. When dinner comes, you're late. Your mother didn't even call you to the spaghetti, didn't even knock on the door. Now the meatballs are gone and it's just sauce, but you barely notice. All the next day in school, you're walking like a shell-shocked soldier. Your friends know, and they're gentle with you. They know better than to ask if you want to go steal a six-pack and sit out behind the drive-in honking the horns during a serious part and laughing. Because every one of them knows you will not come. You will be at home after school, waiting for the sun to go down on your dingy house, because all day long, they know you've been thinking about your headphones and the soft glow of your stereo, the low hum, that bit of a hiss.
Thank you so much for reading that, Jesse. Awesome, awesome story.
Thank you.
It really conjured up memories of my high school days, lying, perhaps having imbibed something I shouldn't have, with the headphones on, listening to music that spirited me away and freaked me out. So I think you did just a gorgeous job capturing that and more. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this after our next story. I think, Jacob, are you going to introduce our next reader?
Yes, and thank you again, Jesse. That was wonderful, and as a lot of folks have said in the chat and stuff, the emotion that you brought to that story and that reading was exceptional. So thank you so much. So yes, our final reader for the night. We've had a wonderful night. We'd like to finish with N. Ryan Tucker, who will be reading his first place story, Train a Coming. N. Ryan Tucker's craftsmanship of words started with his mom, who worked as a librarian when he was young. He initially took a different path to writing and worked in the music industry for several years. Again, there's that overlap between award-winning stories this year. He found his passion for writing through songwriting and lyrics. Currently, Neil, as his first name, is pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in English and Creative Writing at SNU. He has previously published short stories as well as essays on photography. So welcome, Neil. We're looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's called Train a Coming. I don't remember making the devil no damn deal. Must have bargained with him when I was a kid. Can't call to mind much of them times anyway. I knew it weren't no 50-50 shake neither, seeing as how I'd been laid up here in this ditch for the past 10 minutes, upside down with a mouthful of glass. The Bible from my glove box was flung open and wedged between the dirt and where the vent window used to be. That was all the pudding and proof I needed. The Lord have mercy, Dorsey. You alive? Benny only stuttered when he was excited about something. Like a Thompson gun, he'd fire off a word and just get all stuck, blasting the same letter over and over again until something clicked. Then he'd go on rattling off the rest of what was on his mind. We met when I started working at Lou Ray's Texaco over in Roxy about 5 years ago. He drove the tow truck. I was the only one ever calling by his real name. All them other boys called him Throw Together, because he got one blue eye and one brown, missing 2 fingers on his left hand and looked like something the good Lord might have just thrown together at quitting time. The stuttering don't do him no favors neither. I'll be all right, just a little blood, I winced. Still couldn't make him out, but I could hear the dead pine needles and gravel sliding beneath the underslung heels of his boots. I could have sworn you was dead. Hell, maybe I was. Maybe our Lord and Savior just happened to stutter a lot like Benny. It'd be something if heaven wasn't nothing but a hot and humid Mississippi summer afternoon. No, it'll take a hell of a lot more than a stretch of road straighter than a preacher to put me 6 foot under. My voice was raspy from all the dirt and smoke and glass I'd swallowed when I came to a stop. Benny, going up to the chicken shack, call Lou Ray and tell him to bring the truck. I'm going to try to get upright and find my way out of this mess, I hollered. I couldn't tell if I was hurt. Had some blood on my t-shirt. A piece of the windshield had gone clean through my Levi's, a ½ inch into my thigh. Pulled it out and watched some blood trickle up toward my zipper as the copper haze of noon turned black. Ain't going to be quite that simple, boy. My heart kicked over a couple times. I'd known that voice since the first time I'd tangled with the law at 15 years old. It was enough to jar me loose from being passed out cold. Sheriff Lloyd Feathers. From where I was sitting, I must have missed the grand entrance of the Franklin Highway Patrol. Now, Dorsey, the way I see it is, you just plumb stupid. I got you dead to rights this time, son. How you figure that, Sheriff? Oh, well, seeing as we got us a couple witnesses, said they seen you and that misfit you run around with. What's his name? Throwed Together? Said about a ½ mile back you boys were dragging, with him and the Nova and you doing about 100 miles an hour in that there piece of shit Ford Fairlane of yours. Run them right clean off the road. Hey, Sheriff, what? It was 110. I snarled, my teeth clenched around a Winston I'd found laying next to my head. Me and him was like stink on a skunk. Come again, boy? I said I was doing 110, you fat hog. You ain't in no position to smart mouth me, you hear? See, thing is, Dorsey, you got luck, but it's all the wrong kind. Been that way since you was little. You had a daddy, but he didn't care enough about you to stick around. Only thing he was ever good for was wrestling that gun away from the night those 2 boys robbed the Be Quick out on the highway when you was just a baby. Worthless. Still, he should have walked in sooner. I seen you both out in that El Camino when I went inside. You was crying, and he was trying to get you to behave. I wouldn't be deaf in this here ear if you would have just shut your trap that night and let your daddy go on in. That pistol went off less than an inch from my temple. His voice was closer than before. I caught a glimpse of his dusty black felt hat in the busted passenger side glass as his knees popped like a couple firecrackers. He leaned his face down next to what was left of the driver's side window and picked up my torn Bible. There ain't enough scripture in all the Bibles in this county to save your sorry soul, Dorsey Dismukes. You as worthless as your daddy was. He flashed a grin that would have made even old Lucifer himself blush and stood. I heard the thud of my Bible hit the dirt. Where's Benny? I said, wrestling with my pockets trying to find a match. I'd imagine he's halfway back to the station by now. See, I had Jesse cuff him and run him in when we found him trying to run. Of all people, you know this town moves slower than Sunday morning. I wouldn't expect to see him anytime soon. Besides, you ever seen the amount of paper needs to be pushed on a charge of accessory to attempted murder? The cracks in the windshield made him look even fatter than he already was. You as crooked as a fish hook, Lloyd. You know damn well he wasn't running. He was going to call Lou Ray to bring the truck down here. Can't hear you, boy. Tell you what, Lloyd, when I get out of here, I stopped short. My fingers finally got a hold of a match I'd been wrestling with, and I was dying for a smoke. I flicked the tip against my thumb and lit the Winston that had been dangling from my mouth for the past half hour. The humidity made the smoke hang in the air. I could taste the dried blood that had pooled at the bottom of my lip every time I took a drag. It was quieter than the dead. Outside of the locust way up in the pines and the sound of a rattlesnake buzzing somewhere close, everything was hushed. The click-clack of Lloyd's boots along the blacktop jolted me out of my daydreaming. I tamped out my Winston on the dash and flicked the butt out of a hole in the passenger window. His face came into view as he knelt and tore off what was left of the window frame and leaned in, putting a cold barrel of a Smith & Wesson Model 15 right up against my left cheek. Dorsey, you ain't never going to learn, are you? See you way down here at the bottom of this ditch, long out of sight for anybody traveling this 2-lane clip. I ought to put a bullet through your skull and leave you for the buzzards. They'd pick you clean in an hour. Sheriff, you shut your mouth. Sheriff, I muscled in. I told you to keep your mouth shut. Like I was saying, I ought to kill you graveyard dead, but I ain't. Nobody's coming, Dorsey. Not this time. God damn it. What in the shit? I think something bit me. Lord, I'm bit. I seen the snake right before Lloyd walked up to the car, coiled up about 3 foot away. Slate and charcoal and honey and ash. All them colors camouflaged it with the weeds and dirt. It was hard to make out. Had me a little nervous, too. I ain't done nothing to it, but I right as figured the hurt was on the way. It kept shaking, warning. I guess old Sheriff Feathers just couldn't hear it, seeing as he was deaf in one ear and all. Dorsey, help me. Please. It got me on the wrist. Please. I'm getting dizzy. Dorsey! He kept trying to stand up. I guess all the venom went right square into his bloodstream because he just kept stumbling back down, leaning his head on the front wheel of the Fairlane, retching, choking like a starved carburetor. Finally did make it to his feet. I only took a couple steps before I heard him fall out, though. There weren't so much as a peep after that, except for the whisper of that old rattlesnake just a few feet away. I guess for me, sometimes the only light at the end of the tunnel ain't nothing but a train a-coming.
Thank you so much for reading that, Neil. Just amazing use of voice to capture character and develop character throughout.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of times where I was kind of reminded of just thinking of other genres and thinking of film and a lot of like Coen brothers, like their characters and how they are able to kind of create character through just the way that the character presents itself through dialogue. And everything is it just reminds me of that, and it's a beautiful story in that way. So excellent work, and congratulations on placing first in our fall fiction contest this year. Everyone else who has placed, please join us now on camera and everything. We're going to go ahead and start our Q&A. And just get things rolling. I'm going to actually stick with you, Neil, for a second, since you're here and you have your mic on. So again, one of the most striking elements of your story is the voice of your narrator. Can you tell us how you created this voice?
Sure. Really, it's just kind of an amalgamation of people that I've been around my entire life, really, in different capacities. I grew up in Mississippi before moving to Texas. And, there's a lot of, I would call the people of the South very simple, not simple-minded, but they live a very simplistic lifestyle. And that, not that they're all hillbillies necessarily, but there is a lot of that, that type of dialect there. It's just people I've been around my whole life that have just kind of infiltrated.
The thing is it sounds, I guess, simple, like you said, the simple life, but at the same time, it's so clever and biting and sharp-witted throughout. Right. And stuff. And that's what, you do such a wonderful job of capturing that. The banter between between the sheriff and the character and stuff is just, I couldn't keep up with that. I mean, you can hear me right now stumbling over my own words. So I'm very impressed with how you were able to do that. And you said you were raised by a librarian, is that correct?
Yeah, my mom was an elementary school librarian, so not some super upper echelon librarian, but early on, The Sound and the Fury and the Reavers, Faulkner. I grew up, an hour and a half away from Oxford, right? So William Faulkner was a big presence in my youth, and not that I write like him or anything, but I started hearing that name early, and then my mother just loved words and books, and I found the importance of that through her, and Billy Letts, Fannie Flagg, Tennessee Williams, just all of these Southern people and writers, right? So it just kind of seeped into my own soul, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, and librarians at that age are super important. I mean, those are the most important people in my kids' lives, I think, are the librarians at their school. And very cool that you are close to Oxford. I went there one time. I went to Faulkner's home and got to see the home and stuff and all his
Beautiful.
writing on the wall and Jack Daniels and everything like that. So it's pretty cool. Well, thank you. Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you and you can ask the next question to one of our winners here.
Yeah, before I do though, I want to pull a quick question out of the chat, which is basically asking Neil if that's something a piece of something longer that you're continuing to work on.
It is actually. It's funny that question's asked because I do enjoy writing in first person. Larry McMurtry's Horsemen Pass By is one of my all-time favorite novels, and I feel it's a great example of first person narration. That piece that I just read, Train a Comin', was actually just kind of a dialogue study between two characters from a novel that I'm working on, with Dorsey being a secondary auxiliary protagonist from the novel. So it was really just an exploration in dialogue, and it actually kind of reads like a screenplay in a lot of ways, and that's not really indicative of how I write. I typically approach things from a more detached, omniscient aspect of things with little snippets of this type of dialogue thrown in. So it's interesting to me to see how it morphed into its own thing, right? And so yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it totally does. No, that's super interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so let me ask a question of Jesse. And we kind of touched on this before things began. Your story kind of breaks open the chronological flow of time in unexpected ways. When I first read that in your story, a moment like that, kind of a flash forward, I wasn't sure what I had read. I wasn't sure if it was purposeful. I wasn't sure if I was understanding it correctly. But then as I read on and I found, other elements, other moments like that, I felt like it just added such an incredible resonance and depth to the story. It really brought a new perspective to it. And I'm just curious at how you came upon that narrative strategy.
Okay, so I believe in writer correspondence, and I was writing to another writer friend of mine. I was kind of going through a rough time because I had just finished a novel, and then I wait 2 weeks, and then I start my next novel, and there's a huge emotional adrenaline surge when you finish a novel, and for that first week afterwards, you just want to be writing, and then the second week you're resting and preparing for the next novel. But she wanted to know what it was like to come off of such an emotional book and then just have to sit there. So waiting for the sun to go down is actually a metaphor for waiting for to start the next book. So with the time jumps and everything, I wanted to capture what it's like to actually be writing a book. So all the stuff that takes place in the present is while you're writing the novel. And you're experiencing things that happened in your past and things that are happening in your life, and it's going into the novel. Then there's a lot of things from your past, and not always nice things, but things from your past that you're thinking about that also go into the novel. And then while you're writing the novel, you're thinking about the future of this book, and it's not always, you're not always optimistic about it. So when he thinks into the future, it's the same as when I'm writing this book going, okay, this is great, but nobody's going to read this. and like that negativity kind of follows you as you're finishing the book. So I wanted to have the story take place both in the present, the past, and the future, and because that's what it's like to be writing a book. You're thinking about your past, you're in the moment, and you're thinking about the future of the project at the same time. So
Thank you for that's really interesting and illuminating. It's interesting because I think writers often have their own private interpretations of what they're doing, their own structure or their own intent, right? But the readers don't need to know that. I mean, my enjoyment of your story was independent of the information you just gave me deepens my appreciation of your story. But believe me, I didn't, even without knowing it, I was knocked out by your story. So,
thank you.
yeah. So Jacob, I'm going to turn it over to you for another question.
Sure, thank you. And before I jump on to the next person here to ask a question, Jesse, we did have one question in the chat. Do you often write in second person?
Never.
Never. Well, you did an excellent job.
I've never written in second person before, and I didn't like it. I like to be. I'm usually in third, and I like to kind of be in the character and like showing the reader what the character is going through, like if they see this, like what it feels like inside their body, all this kind of stuff. I don't like telling people what you're doing, but at the same time, like for this in particular thing, it was a question. This writer friend I was corresponding with, she asked me what it would be like, so I wanted to put her in that. And after after the letter I sent her, she just said, copy and paste this and use this. Use this. But no, I don't usually write in second person, and this is the very first thing that I ever wrote in that particular way. So
well, you've got a knack for it, because I think a lot of people felt like they were the you when they were reading this, and felt that strong emotional pull from the story. So well done on that. I'm going to move on here and ask Jenel a question here. Your story is a story about a grandmother's love and sacrifice, which really packs a powerful emotional punch, especially the ending, which similar to Amy's story, ends mid-sentence, which I always love that process of that approach and stuff. But I'm kind of curious, what inspired you to tell the story in a sci-fi setting?
Yeah, so it was interesting to me. I kind of, my thesis novel is sci-fi, and I haven't written a lot of sci-fi. So I kind of had in the back of my brain that if I was going to do the short story for this, and I struggle with short story ideas. So my ideas always seem like they're novel length ideas. So I was doing a brainstorming activity I like to do where I, pull up some random pictures and then I make a random word list and I try to connect the dots. And there was a roller coaster, and there was something about ostracized and scientist, and somehow my brain took all of that stuff and went for a run. And then I like things with, I like a lot of heart in my stories. And so I think that was the combination of, let's take this really like classic sci-fi colony on the moon setting, but use it to tell a story about a grandmother and her grandson. So I like that juxtaposition of, very sci-fi, and then and then the grandmother and her grandson. So yeah.
And I think it works really well because there's all kinds of different approaches to science fiction and stuff like that. But this one is deeply rooted in character, in that relationship between these two. And I really appreciate how you're able to do that. And it's fascinating to me to hear your approach here too, where you just, it's almost like a roll of a dice and say, well, here's this, and that. I'm going to combine these three things together and roll with it. And it worked out really well. And you captured this connection quite well, albeit tragic in the end, of course, as well. So thank you. Do you plan on, so do you dabble in other science fiction, or is this your first science fiction approach, or?
So, like I said, my thesis novel is I'm planning is science fiction.
Okay,
This
yeah,
was my first science fiction short story.
short
So,
story. Okay.
yeah,
Do you think you're going to continue to do short stories like that, or?
I like to try. I do. I do. I've written a few. This is my first sci-fi short story. I have a friend of mine that writes these amazing science fiction short stories.
Mhm.
And Nikki Root, and she's been kind of I'm usually, yeah. Somebody said, "What genre do you write in?" My novel that's out there is fantasy, young adult fantasy, totally like girl with sword fantasy, so very different than this. Um, but I've just been really into science fiction lately, and so I was like, "Well, let's take it for a run." And yeah, I'd like to do more. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I love how, I mean, that's bold that is too, just to just run with it and see where it goes and stuff. That's, I think, something that a lot of our audience can take to heart here too, is just, when you have a feeling, just go with it and see what comes of it. And so thank you again.
Thanks.
Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can ask a question to Megan.
Okay, before I do though, Janelle, what's the title of your YA?
Oh, it's Rel, Rell.
Oh, that's right. Here, I'll
Yeah.
put it into the chat.
Thank you.
So, Megan, I suspect have a glimmer of what I might be asking you about at least first, which is the use of the sound effects in your story. I mean, that's when I first read your story, I thought I have got to hear this being read out loud because I know it's just going to be hilarious. But I had no idea that you would actually bring, like a device in to do those sounds. So tell us a little bit about like how you got the idea for that and what it was like to practice. I mean, it's almost like a musical accompaniment to your reading. You really handled it well, I thought.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, when I started to practice reading it, I felt a little silly just saying bloop. So it was just a result of, I listen to a lot of podcasts where they have soundboards. They have certain sounds. There's one, the dun dun from I think NCIS or Law and Order. This podcaster likes to play it whenever he says something kind of silly or just different sounds. So I think combining that, because I'm always just listening to these podcasts, with the idea of just reading this out and having some kind of added texture to it, made it kind of a easy choice to add that in. So I just kind of went into the settings of my phone, and just the point where you can select the noises, that's all. I was just bopping around with that. So it was fun.
Yeah, it really was fun. So, and I take it that this was inspired by a real life job situation that you had?
Sort of. Well, so the job, I used to have this kind of crazy job where I would ghostwrite dating app messages. I would swipe for people. I would write their pickup lines. I would write
Oh.
things.
Oh my gosh.
It was very interesting. I didn't include that in the story because when my writing group read the story, they said, don't include that. That's too interesting. Like you'll get people.
Yeah, that's
That's a
whole
different
other
story.
Yes. I took the job because I thought it would be good novel inspiration. So that'll come at some point. But I was using 15 different phones at one point, and until I kind of quit that job in September, like I felt like my brain was mush because it was just ding, ding, ding all around. And so that story just came out of my frustration with not being able to focus. So I feel much better now that I've quit. So
I'm glad you finally made it through the Fitzgerald.
yeah,
My God, 15 phones at once.
I
all
know,
dinging
it's
and
like
dinging.
it's giving
That's-
me PTSD just thinking about it.
I mean, I
So,
shudder when I hear the Outlook message coming in and stuff. So
right.
Yeah,
So,
stuff.
and you have a novel coming out when is that again? Is that in the spring?
In this late summer, so August
Okay.
19th, 2025, the Barefoot Followers of Sweet Potato Grace will be on the shelves. It's set in Texas. I live in Texas, so yay, for Texas
Yeah.
writers.
There you go. The Texas contingent. Can you type the title into the chat? And this, I don't know if it's available for pre-order yet, but hope our audience will take note.
Yeah, it's a fun story.
And with that, I think we have to bring our evening to a close.
yeah.
It's been, as usual, these things go by in the blink of an eye. Of course, it helps when there's such great stories being read by such great readers. This was really a wonderful night. I want to thank all of our winners, and Ryan Tucker, Jesse Teller, Amy Midgett, Jenel Alan, and Megan Okonsky for sharing their work with us today. For more about their winning pieces, as well as access to a plethora of other readings and writing relating articles, please visit the penmanreview.com, which I believe Jacob put into the chat.
Yes. Yeah, and I throughout the chat as well, I've included the stories of all of our winners. Please feel free to check them out. You can also access them at the main page on penmanreview.com. Yeah, this goes by so quickly, but I was really happy to hear all of your answers, have some time to ask questions to all of you, and just am very excited about all your future endeavors and everything. Just wonderful work all around. So we're all glad that everyone else was able to join us tonight for this evening as well. Keep an eye out for news of our next Word for Word event. That'll be coming up on Wednesday, February 19th. And it's going to feature the award-winning writer, Jeffrey Ford. So mark your calendar for that and stay tuned for more information about that as well. You can register and attend the event for a chance to win a free copy of one of Jeff's books. But until then, I just want to once again thank you to all 5 of our Penman Review Fall Fiction Contest winners, and Ryan Tucker, Jesse Teller, Amy Midgett, Jenel Alan, and Megan Okonsky. Thank you so much for reading tonight. It was our pleasure, and we just really had a great time with all of you.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.